Welcome to the Spirit Restored podcast. This is where the curiosities of spiritualism meet the belief systems of members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This podcast is only for those with an open mind. Join Ken Adams on his quest to find higher planes of spiritual experience.
Welcome to the Spirit Restored podcast today. I'm with an incredible person. Her name is Kelly King. And Kelly is well-versed in the LDS Church, is well-versed in spirituality, in marriage, how it's supposed to work, relationships between her and God. She has a coaching program, I believe it's called the Creation Circle. Is that right? Yes, the Creation Circle. And she leads people through this process of learning how to co-create with God. And today, Kelly has some really wonderful insights on her spiritual journey, her spiritual quest, getting over betrayal, getting over divorce, and some other wonderful insights on spirituality and how to know what's spiritually right for you or not. So, Kelly, would you mind introducing yourself a little bit more for the audience so they get to know you?
You bet. Thanks so much. This is such an honor and a pleasure to be here and to share in this way. So I currently live in Heber Valley, pretty close to Ken, actually, kind of fun.
Yeah, we're
And
neighbors.
I I actually feel such a presence of God in this area. Like there's such a healing, beautiful spirit in this land, and I'm so privileged and honored to live here. I've lived here for 7 years. Previously, my family and I traveled around the world. We were kind of nomadic, and we also served a mission for the church in BYU, Hawaii. I was a Center for Entrepreneurship service missionary with my previous husband, and we were teaching people how to start and grow businesses. We taught leadership. We taught how to have successful service projects that made global impact. Lots of things like that. I'm also a top leader in doTERRA essential oils. I have the title of Presidential Diamond, and just means that I lead a global team of that. That's been my privilege and honor for over a decade. And then I also have developed my own coaching program, which you referenced. It's called Creation Circle. And that kind of came out of my own spiritual journey, faith journey, and the tools and the principles that were helping me to grow and to develop and to co-create with God. And I wanted to share those with a broader audience. And so that was something that developed over many years, but I put it concretely together in 2022. And so people can participate, but they can also become a coach of that. So I also have 3 children, and I'm also I'm single now as my divorce is complete, and I'm now actually engaged. And so I will be a bonus mom to other children. So I'm excited to just dive into this topic and to feel, the joy of sharing, more about how this can be a blessing to other people.
Absolutely. And it sounds like you have a really successful life. You've shown, I mean, you've done a lot of things that people are like, wow, I wish I could be successful like a business person, or I wish I could go serve a mission, with my spouse, or I wish I could, there's all these things that are really cool dreams that you've done actually in your life, right? And now you're also in this point in your life where you're transitioning totally into something new and something different than what you've encountered before. I wanted to know a little bit more about your religious and spiritual background in your upbringing. Maybe you could tell us some about that.
Yes, so I was raised as an active member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and just super grateful for my parents for building that foundation for me, that I knew that, I had a literal, Heavenly Father who I was his offspring. I was his child, and he loved me and cared for me. And I always had strong faith. And then as I grew older and had more and more personal experiences and understood how the power of prayer worked, um, I would say I became more spiritually mature on my mission. I served a mission in Bulgaria. That helped me a lot to depend on him and to see faith in action. And then as I came back from my mission and became a young mom and all of those things, I actually started to have experiences with angels, and I started to explore that. Like, what is that? What does that mean? And why are they visiting me? And I would see them as well as feel them. And then for a while, I, just really dug deep into that. But then I've also expanded into other things, as I mentioned before. Essential oils is really an important thing for me. I find it is a joy as a business, but I've I've found that elements of the earth can be greatly supportive. Oils are gifts of the earth, right? But we also have access to many other materials and elements that we can learn, and learn the intents and how we can, use them to our benefit. I believe everything on the earth can be used for the benefit of man. We just need to learn how to use it in the pure intent. And let's see what else. I'm a big believer of natural health, and whenever possible, to focus that way. I also believe in personal development every day, and continue a lifelong learning. And I've been on a path for that for a long time. I believe that people can change, and that with a humble heart and a willing spirit, that you can completely change your life, and that as you co-create with God, you truly can take a weakness and make it a strength. And I believe that miracles happen in many forms. And if you want to create a miracle, then you can be taught by the Spirit on how to do it. And you can see something evolve in your life that you never knew was possible. And it can have massive ripple effect and bless many people.
Wonderful. I really like your mindset, your mentality around spirituality, of believing people can change, believing that you can use your faith and make a ripple effect, right, in your life. Something that stood out there, you kind of just said it and moved on. I was like, whoa, hold on. So you were talking about you have visions of angels. Do you still have them? Was that something when you were younger?
So in my 20s, I had an experience where I hit a deer, and then when I got back into the car, I was assessing the car. I got back in the car, and there was a song on that said, "Know ye not that angels are near?" And it was just like perfectly timed, and it just kind of like opened my mind to like, okay, so if they are near, they're here right now. Who are they, right? And then I started just an inquiry, right? Like, who are my angels? what are their impact on my life or whatever? And I did for a season see them quite frequently. Excuse me. But when you have a gift like that or an invitation like that, I was seeing positive and negative spirits, and I didn't like it. And so I actually asked God to take it away. I don't really feel like I personally needed to see them anymore. I just needed to see enough to know that they existed, if that makes sense. And I am a big believer of angels, and that you can hire an angel committee to support you, and all these kinds of things. But hire an angel, right? There's a book on that too. But my point is that I personally don't want to see them anymore. I just want to know that they're there, and I can connect with them as a friend or something like that. I only want to work with the positive, realms of it.
Yeah, I remember when I was a little kid, and I was walking through the church in the dark. It was, like sometimes the church building has only like a few lights on. Maybe it's some kind of like youth activity or something like that. And I'm walking around, I'm thinking, like, what if I see an angel right now? Because I had just heard about Joseph Smith seeing angels and all that kind of stuff. I was like, I don't think I'm ready for that. I don't know if I want those kind of like spiritual visitations and things like that. So yeah, I can, but at the same time, when I was a missionary, I mean, there was, I was in Ukraine, so I was in Eastern Europe as well. You're in
What year was
Bulgaria.
that?
That was 2008 to
Okay.
2010. So
I'm
I
a
went to Bulgaria actually. So I've been to Bulgaria. We had to renew our visa and we went to Bulgaria, and
we
that's
used
where we did it. To
to go
Sofia.
to Romania, I believe. yeah. So that's interesting.
So you went to Romania. Yeah, I went to Sofia, and it's just a beautiful city. Gorgeous, gorgeous city. I loved it.
Yeah.
And I thought, why aren't there anybody smoking here? Because in Ukraine, there were so many people just, the streets
Oh,
were filled with smoke, like just so many cigarettes. Just like, even after my mission, I'd have dreams that I was smoking cigarettes, like that's how much smoke was there. Probably developed a slight nicotine addiction. Well, anyway, this is off topic. When
wow.
I was a missionary, there were some rumors from the members that the stake president had seen an angel, and the angel was talking to him and telling him, how to lead the church in the area. And I remember thinking as a missionary, I was like, whoa, I would totally want to see an angel. Like that would actually be cool. And now, you've told me this experience and everything. And what would make you see them and then say, okay, I don't want to see them anymore? You mentioned that some were good and some were not. Is that kind of what it is? Or
Yeah. Yeah. My first experience was really dark and really paralyzing, and it was frightening. It was really frightening. And I didn't understand what was happening and things like that. And then after that, I was like, well, if I can see a dark angel, then I want to see the opposite, And anyway, so I just felt a little bit paralyzed, like in fear, like, am I going to see one today or not? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
they just like kind of show up or whatever. And a lot of times it would happen when I would be alone and I was like anxious at night or whatever. So I just was like, I just don't want this anymore. And I don't miss it, honestly. So if anyone has it, and it's serving you, great. But if it's not, I do think it's okay to turn things off.
yeah. So I had an experience when I was in college that I was meeting with these, like, I had some friends I'd go hang out. There were these two girls, and they kind of recognized I had an uncanny ability to like read someone's mind, essentially. And I hadn't really recognized it in myself much, but then they started pushing the boundaries of what I could do.
Oh,
So
yeah,
I
I get
started
that.
doing more and more and more. And it became something where I remember I was at the Brigham Young University Testing Center, which is like a huge line of students, right? Now imagine you have this ability where you can like pick up on people's thoughts and emotions, and like a really high empathic skill, right? And they're all going to take a test they're scared of failing, right? It's just, it was
Too
overload.
much.
It
Too
was
much.
overload. And I was like, okay, I don't want this anymore. And I kind of did the same thing. I was like, can I just like shut this off? And then it just stopped.
Well, here's another example. This is kind of funny. So my daughter, who's now almost 17, when she was 2, she just kept saying that her bum hurt like really bad, like her tailbone basically. And she was just like, ow, ow, ow. And I was like, what is going on with you? Like, I couldn't discern what it was. And I talked to someone who was gifted, and they said, oh, that's so interesting. When does she say this? She was picking up during earthquakes,
Oh, wow.
literally. Like she's so connected to the earth that like there was a massive earthquake in Chile or Haiti or wherever, and she just was like in pain, physically pain. So we shut that off because she's 2 years old. She
Hmm.
didn't need to like feel the pain of the earth. But guess what her gifts are? Her gifts are totally animals. She was a vegetarian for 6 years. Like she's, like she's here on the planet to like be a caretaker of the earth. And
Yeah.
so of course that was like her real sensitivity. And it's just like anything, and you hear about these experiences where people have like a near death experience, they come back with all these gifts or whatever. And I think it's wonderful if they are serving you to be a higher version of yourself right now. But if they're creating fear or doubt or trauma or whatever, and you don't have the skills to handle it, like empathy, empath or whatever, it's okay just to be like, can I mature into that? Can I move into that, or can you teach this to me line upon line? Because if it just comes so quickly, it can be overwhelming. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
absolutely.
So,
And I think you brought up like a really, I think I'm frozen here to unfreeze. I think you brought up a really good point about that, is that you do it line upon line. And for me, it's like, okay, I was looking at this empath skill, and I like how you maturely with the angels, you're like, I include them still in what I do. I just don't want to be seeing them all the time or like inviting them in my life like that. And for me with the empath side of things, just like less than a year ago, my wife was learning about ESP. And she's like, "You told me this story about college. Can we like practice something?" And I was like, "I don't know if I want to." This is what I told her. I'm like, "I'm not sure if I want to get into that right now." And she's like, come on, do it." So I said, "All right, fine, I'll do it." And she asked me a few questions. She said, okay, I'm just going to think of something. You just say the first thing comes to your mind, and or that you think I'm whatever I'm thinking about. And she started thinking about something. She had an image in her mind, and I just said, um, water, shoes, right? Is like what came to my head. And she's like, "Whoa, I was at the beach and I had my feet like I just took off my sandals." It's like what she was thinking of. And I was like, okay. And we did. She's like, okay, okay, that had to have been a fluke. So she goes to the next thing and she's like, okay, now I'm thinking of something. And I said, peanut butter snack, like something. And she's like, "What the heck?" She goes, "I was thinking of your dad eating his favorite snacks." And my dad loves peanut butter. That's his favorite snack to eat. And I was just like, I don't know, like this, maybe this is too powerful. Because part of it is like, I don't want to like let her down if I do it wrong, you know? And the other part of it is like, this is a little freaky, you know?
Yeah.
And
Well, I think anything can be developed, right?
right.
In practice. So if you wanted to develop it, you could, but if you're like, I don't really need it, um, then but it would really serve if you were in a situation where you're trying to understand like a child, for example, and like they're not telling you something, like I had a child who had run away and I I just did not even know like how to deal with it. I mean, we found her, right? But then I didn't know what to do next,
Yeah.
right? And so I just prayed, and started surrounding me with people who had different gifts. I literally had a whole team, a whole committee of people for her with all different kinds of gifts. And I'm like, okay, all of us together can support this child. And then ultimately, I went on a water fast for 3 days and I prayed that truth would be revealed. And I read something in her journal because it was open on her bed and the spirit told me to read it. And it was like, there's the answer. And
Wow.
so I think sometimes God will give you the thing that you're looking for, but it's going to go through a whole lot of other routes. But in
Yeah.
that situation that you have, maybe it could serve in a moment of like a major crisis, or challenge.
Right. And I think that these spiritual gifts, so a big question I have is, why have them, spiritual gifts? You know what I
Mm,
mean? It's kind of like from this conversation, both you and I had similar experiences like, hey, maybe
yeah,
I don't want this, you know?
yeah.
And I think about the day-to-day of life. I think about what we spend most of our attention doing, right? We run businesses, we have family relationships, we have our health to take care of. And really like life is lived best
Mhm.
in the moment, right? Like when you're
Yep.
fully present, when you're fully here in the here and now, then you're enjoying life. So I kind of wonder like, why have these spiritual gifts if
Let
the
me,
point is
let me
just to
show
be
you
present?
something, and show the audience something. So this will illustrate my thoughts. So this, can you see this sculpture?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so this was I had commissioned by a woman by name Kathy Erdman. She's out of Springville. It's called Heaven Weeps, Heaven Reaches. And
Wow.
it has an infinity sign in it. Do you see it? A vertical infinity.
Yeah, I totally see it. Yeah.
Okay. So when I saw her sculpture for the first time, I had an emotional response, right? And so then I contacted her because she had a version of that at a different at an art exhibit, but it had sold. And I contacted her and I said, I absolutely love your work. And I was in separation on my kind of the end of my separation into being divorced. And um that to me represented something I could not otherwise express. You know, this cycle of heaven weeping and reaching and heaven weeping and reaching. And I really felt like this woman served my soul by her gift. And so I commissioned it, and I hope that anyone who sees that feels the power of that message. You know what I mean? And so I feel like when we gather and collaborate with other people, then we really do serve one another. And so there might be something that I say or you say that can serve someone, but there also is something that you create or that you build or you become or you support as a philanthropist. You know what I mean? Like there's all these different ways that we can create, and yet we do need each other, right? Because it's this collective, thing. So this yeah, I don't know. This concept is very interesting to me.
Yeah, you and I briefly in our conversations before, we started on the topic of spiritual deception, right? That was something that was really interesting to both of us. And I was reading, it's called The Lost Books of the Garden of Eden. I don't know if you've ever read those. It's basically, you read Genesis about Adam and Eve, and it's just this tiny little segment about them. It's just like 10 chapters or something like that. In the Lost Books of the Garden of Eden, it's like 100 chapters. So it's 10 times more of the story, 10 times more of the metaphors. It's like a ton of stuff. And they're not really sure the origin of it or how old it is.
Where you get it. Okay, got it.
Yeah. So I've been looking, I've been trying to find out, and there's not clear information on how someone got it. I think it was something pulled out of the Vatican and they translated it, but there's not really evidence like how old it is or anything. But one thing that stood out as I was reading it is how many times Satan was trying to deceive Adam and Eve. Because in these books, it goes deeper into what they were feeling and experiencing after being expelled out of the garden. So, and it gets some clarity as well. It says they basically didn't have physical bodies until they were out of the Garden of Eden.
Okay.
So they put on skins of animals. And in this context, that means that the actual human skin that is mortal, right? And so they didn't know darkness from light. They didn't know warmth from cold. They didn't know hunger from being full. They didn't know thirst.
Yeah.
They didn't know any of that. And they were kicked out of the garden not knowing anything. And they were told to go into called the Cave of Wonders is what it was. It was just a cave, right? That they would be in there, and God told them to be there and to protect themselves and to be inside of it. Well, every now and then Satan would come, right? Dressed as an angel of light, right? He'd come and he'd be dressed in this light that he would bring and try and lure them out of the cave so he could kill them. It's what he would do, because he knew that they were part of God's plan. They're part of what needed to happen.
I just listened to the Little Red Riding Hood story yesterday. And it's like what you're saying is like, oh my gosh, like what a metaphor with the wolf, right?
Right.
So interesting. Go ahead. Keep going.
Yeah. A wolf dressed in sheep's clothing, as you might say in the New Testament. Right. And so they come out and they hear this voice from outside the cave, and they see this light, and they're not used to darkness and light anyway. They don't know where the light comes from except from God, right? And they're just experiencing sunlight. So it's super confusing to them what to do. And God is always intervening all the time. And Satan's always trying to deceive. And it's constant like this because Satan's trying to ruin the plan of God, and God is keeping it alive. And then you have these humans that are clueless. Like when I say clueless, I mean it. They really can't take care of themselves. They're like children. And God had to be a very intensive parent in that moment for them. And I think of spirituality in this way: just because you're having a spiritual experience doesn't mean it's from the right source.
Yes.
So source is a really important to think about in spirituality. I mean, I've spoken to a variety of people that, do mushrooms for spirituality, to ayahuasca, to looking to aliens, to like all this kinds of stuff, right? And the big question is source, right? What is the source of your spirituality and how do you know it's benefiting you? So I'm going to ask you that question. What is the source of your spirituality? How do you know it's benefiting you?
It's such a big topic, and it's such a personal journey, because I can't explain it and then you just pick it up and you're like, okay, I got it, because it's line upon line, as we talked about before, but it's, experience upon experience of what feels right, what what feels like a no, with a yes, a no, all of that, and where it lands in your heart. And then, you got to find your spiritual love language too. Like, how does God speak to you? I have an incredible book. I don't think I have it right here, but it's called Whisper by Mark Batterson. Have you read it?
No, that's
It's
interesting.
such a good book. He's a pastor in the DC area. He has many congregations, but he is a very good writer. He's written several books, but this one in particular is the very beginning of the book. You just say, well, he has two things that he says is interesting. If you were to have a one-on-one with God right now and he said, what do you want? Most of us would not be able to respond. We wouldn't even know what we wanted. And yet he is our Father and he wants to give us what we want, right?
Mhm.
And then the other thing he says in there is just say, speak, Lord, for your servant is listening, right? And then just pause and like let him write, just write, and for years I was doing what I call letters to God, which is basically just Q&A style, right? Like you're just, asking a question, receiving an answer, back and forth, back and forth. And everything in my life that I have taken the time to pause and to reflect and to slow it down and to get clear on has been because of a Q&A experience, and I wear a key on my neck right here, little diamond key, to remind me of asking you shall receive, knock it shall be opened unto you, and that we all have that power within us to ask the questions of our heart. And I recently created another piece, a collaborative piece, and I don't know if there'll be show notes. We can link to a photo of it, but it's a 6 by 4 foot massive collaboration of hands that come down like with this from the sky, from the top of it, and then hands going up like this. So it's like hands going down, then hands going up, and then there's keys that are pouring out from heaven, and then padlocks going up, and then they meet. The keys and the locks meet, and it's really a beautiful piece. I did it with an artist named Laura Erickson, and that was another collaboration creation project that I did because I wanted to experience or reflect or go down this road of what heaven does for me, right? It gives me the answer for the next step, and then it continues to like show up in my life that way. And so anyways, I just feel like the spiritual journey is so personal that if you take the time to make it intimate and rich and wonderful, then God will speak to you in the way that's meaningful to you, right?
Mhm.
And I have lots of ways, but I don't know. What is it for you?
So I did want to ask about the Q&A, what you do with Q&A. How do you do that? Is it like a daily thing? Do you do it a certain time of day? Or is it like,
No, so I have two things. This is actually one of the exercises, and I've done this many times with people. Like you could ask a question of, God, what is the most important question I need answered today? And then he gives you the question, because sometimes we don't even know the question to ask, right?
Right. Yeah.
Then you can ask the question and then you can seek for the answer through the day. Or you can do it as just, what are the questions of my heart right now? Get still, write down your questions, and then just say, God, this is my inquiry right now. And then just start. And sometimes it'll be immediate, and sometimes it'll be like something you labor over, you know. And then I also just like sit down and just write like a thank you letter almost. And then I'll say, here's what's on my heart right now. What are your thoughts on this? And then I'll just pause and just impressions, or, whatever. That's what I do. So
Wow, that's really cool. So I like that how you view you might not even know the question to ask. And I believe
yeah.
that, there's so much that's just unconscious to us that we might not be familiar with. And I did a meditation. I was just meditating by myself, actually, is what I was doing. And I started having these thoughts of as if God was coming to me in my meditation, right? And he's asking me, what do you want? And at first I was ashamed. I was like, I don't really want to say. Right? It's like, I don't want to say what I actually want. He's like, come on, I'm God. I already know what you want. So just say it. And I said, I want a nice car. That's what I said. I said, give me that nice luxury car. And he looks at me, he's like, is that it? And I was like, I guess there's more. Oh, I want that yacht too. And I was feeling ashamed. I was like, why am I telling the God of the universe that I just want these material
Good
possessions, right?
toys.
And
Big
then and he
toys. Little
and
toys.
he's like, is that it? Is that all you want? And I said, well, I guess I want my family to be happy, and I want my friends to get the things they want too, right? And he looks at me, he's like, is that it? What else? Right? And I was like, man, like is he fishing for something? You know what I mean? How people keep asking questions, right? To like find out. And I said, no, and I got really ashamed, really, really ashamed, because something came in my mind that I felt like was in contrast with who God is. I said, I want the world. I want the power. I want to
Whoa,
own the world. That's what I
whoa,
said.
whoa.
And he looks at me and he grabs me by the collar in the meditation, pulls me out of the world so we're above it. And he goes, is that it? Is that all that you want?
Oh,
And we just kept going further. And I said, no, I don't want I don't want the world. I want your power, is what I told him. And
wow.
then he pulls me up further so I could see the entire universe. And he says, is that it?
Wow.
And finally, I felt this great humility in the meditation. And I said, I just want the choice. I just want the choice to have what I want, to do what I want, and live how I want to be. Right. And that was a really powerful moment of teaching, right? Is that even all these things that I was ashamed of, that were actual desires of my heart, right? He didn't care. He thought, is that it? To him, it didn't mean anything. It was minuscule, right? It's like even saying, I want your power was not anything to God. He didn't care. It
Yeah.
just didn't matter. But he wanted me to realize that what I actually wanted was belief in my own choices,
Yes.
belief in my own
Oh,
power and my own agency, and
wow.
that
Thank
all
you.
of that will be possible if I just believe that. So, so
Wow.
for me, spiritual understanding, how you make like the source of spirituality, knowing you're in the right source, it's something that should empower you to
Yes.
be a better version of yourself
Yes.
and to be more like God. And it's something that should bring you closer even now.
I love that. Wow. Thank you for sharing that. So beautiful. But what the clincher, what you said was like, I just want the power to choose.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And I've been, so these little girls that are going to be my little girls, so I'm engaged, and they're 5 and 6, and they have this book. It's called What Would Danny Do? And it's great because it has, like, the book has 9 different endings. And so it's all about, and the boy's, his superpower is the power to choose. And so you're helping him to make his choices for that, it's like, today I'm going to give you the power to choose what I should do, whatever. Anyways, and then so he'll say, like, should he cry and shout, or should he be kind, and this, and it's just like this really interesting adventure. And so then what I did for the girls is I made their own books, and I'm like, hey, what should Annie do? And like I made their own books, and I'm going to keep making them, because teaching children this, that they have the power to choose, and then showing scenarios of possibilities, is really such a mature concept. But yet, like, if you can teach a child this at a younger age, how much better off they'll be, right? Because now, as I'm choosing to move forward with a new relationship, and there's a load of consequences to it, good and bad, right? Like, okay, well, here's their traumas. Here's their background, here's their culture, here's all of this stuff, and then here's mine. And okay, how do we, will it combust? Like, will it will it develop and strengthen and support, or like, is it like this, or is it? And it's been really a challenge to me. And ultimately, when I was praying about it, God just reflected it back to me. He's like, what do you want? And I was like overcome. It's so emotional for me to even say it now. I was overcome that he said, what do you want, my daughter? Like, do you want this? And I wrestled with it for many, many months. And yet our relationship would develop and develop and develop. And I'm like, yeah, there's no perfect relationship. There's no perfect relationship on the planet. The end. There's just not. And yet the things that I'm choosing are a good fit for what I need right now. And I can offer a lot in return as well. So I feel like my gifts are used. I feel like his gifts are appreciated and used. So I feel like it's a good fit that way. And yet there's so much that we're continuing to learn and to grow. And I don't know, it'll be a really interesting journey.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about, so you had mentioned with your previous husband, you had served a mission together, a service mission. Did you say it was in Hawaii?
Yeah, at BYU Hawaii.
Wow, that's cool.
It was.
And and now you've since gotten divorced.
Yeah.
And now you're finding a new relationship, right? Someone that you're engaged to. What what were the things that happened that led to the divorce? If you're okay sharing
Oh no,
that.
I'm not gonna share.
Or
But
like whatever you're comfortable sharing, things that kind of um I don't know how you decided to go on your own or
okay. Well, basically there was a incongruence of who I thought he was versus, you know what I mean? Like, there was the person I thought he was and the person he was. So that incongruence I couldn't handle, and it was no longer safe for me to stay in that relationship. Does that make sense?
yeah, that makes sense. So that's really simple. Please don't share details you don't want to share. Yeah, sorry for some questions I put people on the spot.
You're good. You're
I
good.
I do want to know something that you had spoken about earlier is also things like spiritual deception you've felt in your family or from others. Do you have some things or some experiences that also taught you how to be aware of, like maybe there's some bad examples or there's some good examples, like
Yeah. So, spiritual deception, I think, does affect people more than they realize. And we just have to be really careful of like what voice we're listening to, right? Because the ego is really strong. We want what we want, and sometimes we justify things that aren't good for us or good for our families. And there's a massive impact that way. And so spiritual deception was one of the reasons why my marriage failed. Um, I I feel like the deception that was happening was toxic, right? And it was not helpful. And so there needed to be a break in the relationship so that he could heal and I could heal. and then we can make new choices to move forward, right? So that much I'll to share. But the deception that happens when someone feels that they have received a word from God and that they are hell bent in like moving forward on that at whatever cost can really damage relationships, right? And so, as I mentioned before, to prevent that is whatever inspiration you get, personal revelation or whatever, really needs to check out with what the scriptures say and what you believe, is right and moral and true, you know, and whether or not you believe in living prophets and apostles on the earth, they're teaching application of scripture. And so you can check it out that way too. But I don't believe God would ever tell you to do something that would be in harm of yourself or anyone else, or that would need to be secret,
Yeah, there's been stories about that in LDS culture for centuries. I mean, of people that thought they were talking to God or had the only communication with God, and then ended up not having that communication and causing problems. I think one recent example, I don't know if you know who Chad Daybell is. That's a
Yeah.
very, very recent example. I think he was from
Frightening.
Springville. Yeah, and a frightening example that ended terribly for a family. But he was someone that was kind of like more doomsday prophecies kind of person. He was friends with Julie Rowe, who's also like a now no longer LDS, but she's a prophetess in her own words, and she's seeing visions and all this kind of stuff. And I was learning about these stories, right? And it wasn't just them. I mean, it's also um it seems like any kind of violent experience that happened here in Utah or something has some background in one of these kind of people, you know?
Yeah.
And it makes you step back and think is like, does it really matter to get caught up in these kind of things? Because naturally humans are always looking for answers, right? They're looking for like, how do I prepare for the future? How do I make sure I'm safe? And it's that ego that you spoke about, right? It's the ego that feels like it needs to be protected. It's like, how do I make sure that if there's an earthquake that I'm safe and everybody else in my family is? And then naturally what I've seen is sometimes people look at other people as if there's them and there's me, and there's like this like they don't know what's going on in life, like, but I do, so I'm almost more
Oh
righteous
yeah.
or superior,
Yeah.
like.
Or like there's
So I was
some kind of hierarchy or something. Yeah.
so I was looking at these social
In the know.
dynamics.
You're in the know because you know
I'm in
something.
the know, yeah, exactly. So I was looking at all these social dynamics, and I was just like, and actually I read the book The Power of Now. I don't know if you've read that by Eckhart Tolle.
Yeah.
Tolle, maybe is how you say it. And basically, he just says the only place to really live is in the moment, is right now. That's where everything is. And I was just like, yeah, why do all these like prophets and prophesying, why does any of it matter? You know? And
Wow. Interesting.
so I
Well,
start thinking about that.
I do feel that there's some guidance when we have warnings of things, but I'm choosing not to live in fear, right? So as long as you take things with um, a confidence that that there is going to be always spiritual protection. So when I'll share this part, when the crumbling of my marriage happened, there was an intervention of sorts on behalf of my ex-husband, and I immediately dropped to my knees and prayed to understand. And the words from D&C 8488, Jesus shall go before my face. His spirit shall be in my heart. His angel shall be on my right hand and his left, and his angels round about me to bear me up. That verse, that strength was like, that's how I'm going to get through this moment right now, is calling on Jesus, bringing him right here, his spirit in my heart, his angels around me as a team, and just feeling that force, that force of spiritual warfare, really, you know? And so that's the power of now, right then, and I do believe that you can call on that. And I've seen it, I've experienced it. And that's foundational. If you have that knowing that Jesus has your back and your front, and all of it, that's the shield, that's the armor of God.
Yeah, after I read the book, The Power of Now, I started thinking about the New Testament and things that Jesus was actually teaching, right? And I realized that in the New Testament, he says, take no thought for the morrow has enough to worry about it for itself, right? Which is basically saying, just focus on what's present in front of you right now. And now the reason why I think this is very, very important spiritually is because if we're in a spiritual excitement where we're looking at the possibilities of the future, like in a prophecy, and we're all strung up in that kind of anxiety about stuff, that's actually the mind at work. And the mind is a tool that measures differences. That's what the mind does. But the spirit is not one of those tools. The spirit is closer to intuition. And intuition is felt in the present moment. And so I noticed that this kind of anxiety, sometimes I get some anxiety about my financial future or things like that, and I'll have to recenter back into myself in the present here and now to really understand what my intuition is telling me so that I can get the answers I'm looking for. And I've noticed actually out of, I would say, President Nelson, who's the current prophet of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, that he's starting to focus members more on that same thing, which is just look inside yourself, be guided by the Spirit, and find the answers for you, right? Let God prevail in your life is the big thing.
Yes.
And at the time I was just figuring out where I stood in the church and faith and all that kind of stuff, right? Because I was learning all these new things and wondering how everything fit together. And I realized that, from President Nelson, that was really valuable advice too, is to
Yes.
learn how to let God prevail.
Sorry, I'm just going to cut you off for a second. I also think it's really wise for all of us to recognize when he's acting as prophet and when he's acting as a man. And whether or not you believe in vaccinations, when he demonstrated he was getting his vaccine, I believe he was acting as a doctor, as a man. And if we go back to what he said as a prophet, we can anchor our choice in that God will reveal what's right for me in that case. And yet a lot of people took it to be, well, if he's doing it, I'm going to do it because he's a prophet, follow the prophet, right? And I don't want to fault him on this, but I don't think he served that message very well in that moment. Because it would have been awesome if he had said, I prayed and this is the choice for me. What is the choice for you? Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so I just invite everyone always to recognize his very first message was, you will not survive the last days without the constant guidance of the Holy Spirit. Yes. And survive is the word right there. You know what I mean? And I think it was to survive spiritually. I don't know what it was, but it was, the word survive was just like blazing on my heart. And I was like, okay. So I just think with everything, whoever you're following, you can listen to it and then check it out for yourself and be like, does this resonate for me? Because the people that were deceiving us in my family, my kids and stuff, and they would tell us things and it would be like so confusing. Well, confusion is deception, right? And so if you feel confused, that is your answer, you know? And so I think you just have to be really clear that God doesn't speak like that.
That's amazing. I really like those thoughts. Yeah, I remember that same time when the vaccination notice came out. And I'm a very linguistically minded person. So I will
Yeah.
look at every single word, right?
Mhm.
And like be like, okay, what's going on here? And I feel like a lot of members took it as I command you to take this vaccine,
Yes.
but the word was urge,
Uh,
and that's not a prophet word.
mhm.
Urge is not a word a prophet uses, right? That's, and like you said, to your point, I think, to be honest, I think he was speaking from lawyers because the government was able to successfully shut down all churches across the country and make it so people couldn't worship together. And
There you go.
I think
That's fear, though.
I exactly. So that's where I look at things and I'm like, okay, it's really not necessary to put fear into people. And I worked for the church for a decade, and fear was a common theme in the business side of the church.
Wow. Wow.
So one, and so was faith. Faith was also a common theme. They both existed. And one of the things that they were most fearful about with missionaries was their devices, being able to use devices, being able to use internet and all that. And I remember being part of a process where you have to vet an app or a website and you look through it and then you send it up the line and then they have to look through it on a technology side. And then if it doesn't allow them access to pornography, so then there's like this whole list of apps that are whitelisted, right? That's like they're allowed to use and these ones they're not allowed to use because it gives them access. And I sat back and I started talking to someone. I was like, has anyone ever just like sat back and really looked at this according to gospel principles? I'm like, why are we limiting our missionaries? Why are we removing their choice? Why
Right.
are we taking away their agency from choosing what they should be doing? In a more ideal perspective, if they have an issue with pornography, then they go
They
to
will
their
find a way.
mission president and they use the gospel of Jesus Christ to help them.
Right.
And that's it. That's all you do. Let them make their choices. Well, luckily a lot's changed since then, and there is more that's opening up for missionaries, but to your point, there is some of that fear, and it creeps in on the business side of the church, on the legal side of the church. And I haven't seen it. I mean, it does come in on the ecclesiastical side. I mean, I was just in a ward meeting where we were talking about missionary work, and there's a lot of fear around talking to someone else or how you might offend someone or things like that. So I like that you had that perception, right? Where you look at things, is this fear based or faith based? And I totally agree. In that example with vaccination, it seemed like a fear based approach. Um, to me, it was based out of the legal department.
Yeah.
And
I
I
think
just, I just don't think that a religious institution should be recommending medical choices to people, is
no.
really how
And
I view it.
yeah, I don't keep going down this path, but I just think the bottom line is when something comes out, take the time to take it to the Lord.
Yes. And that's what we did as a family in that instance as well. We said, what do we actually want to do?
Yeah.
And we took it up with God and within ourselves and found an answer for us. Um,
Yeah.
I didn't, we didn't fall into this idea. It was like, hey, yes, sir. And one thing we spoke about earlier on the phone, we were speaking yesterday, is this concept of let God show you how you're like him
Mhm.
instead of having him show you how you're not like him.
Yes, I like
Yeah.
that too.
How have you how have you incorporated that in your life in how you approach spirituality, how you approach God?
Mhm. That's a beautiful question. I just have a really tender relationship with God, like as a father, very deep, spiritual, intimate relationship with God the Father. And then I have been developing my relationship with Jesus Christ, because for a long time I didn't really understand how I was supposed to like talk to Jesus. I'm like, I want to talk to him, but I'm not praying to him. I didn't understand, and so I've also developed that as well. But I just feel like, sorry, I'm missing kind of your question right now, but what was exactly you want
Yeah.
me to
So
say?
how have you found that God shows you more that you're like him
Oh, right,
instead
right,
of
right.
showing you how you're not like
Yeah,
him?
I was just saying in that intimacy, that's where I was going with that. Is that intimacy with God, like being a best friend. Like you just like you're not alone, and like you're just like, oh, he knows my thoughts, he knows my desires, he knows my weaknesses, he knows my needs. And so as I've developed that close bond and knowing that I can call on him in any circumstance, in any way, shape, form, then I can feel that tenderness. And when you feel a bond with someone, then you are alike. You are best friends. You see that. And I believe that God does speak your love language the very best. And so for me, I have I I see symbols, or he talks to me in numbers sometimes, or like I'll see certain numbers and they mean something because I have developed a language with him. And so I just feel like you've got to find your way how you can be alike, you know? And if you're a sarcastic person, God will be a sarcastic person with you. If you're a jokester, he'll be a jokester with you. If you're a person who loves art, he'll speak to you in art or music or whatever. But I feel like that bond, that likeness is the knowing part. It's the intimacy part.
That is awesome. Yeah, I like that he's speaking at your language, at how
Yeah.
you like to be communicated with. I had a conversation with a friend just the other day about how people a lot of times have a facade,
Mhm.
right? It's like they're showing one thing, and sometimes the facade is so easy to see through. It's like you're saying this, but I don't believe you. You know what I mean? It's like,
Right.
and he was all upset about this, that he knows some people that just like he does business with them and he doesn't like getting lunch with someone. And it wasn't about getting to know him, it was about actually trying to move forward a
Connection
business
or
deal
something.
and stuff. And he
Yeah.
doesn't like that kind of facade thing. And I told him this, I said, behind the facade is another facade.
Yeah.
And it's this idea that we sometimes we look at ourselves how we're not like God, how we're not capable, how we're not already divine, how we don't have the spiritual potential or the power within us or the choice that we have. So then and we don't want other people to know that. So we put up a facade to make people think we have our stuff together, we're confident, or we're doing business well, or things like that. But both of those are a facade.
Mhm.
And behind the facade, which is behind the facade, is the truth that you are a divine individual, that there's nothing to be ashamed of who you are, and that your circumstances are perfectly known by God, and that you can accomplish whatever you want as you co create with them. So, what are some ways in your life that you co create with God?
Mhm. Love it. Um, so many ways. I already explained like the art. So I've been doing a lot of art collaborations. I also recorded 2 songs recently. They're on YouTube. One is called "Loved You Before" and one is called "A Living Prayer." And in both of those projects was very co-creation. Also my coaching program curriculum, that was definitely a co-creation. My business in doTERRA was definitely a co-creation. The way I parent is a co-creation. Um, I'm remodeling a house, which is a co-creation. I feel like I have tangible projects, but also I have spiritual things. I have goals that I work with, all kinds of stuff.
Awesome. And what are some things that you've co-created with God in your life that you've sat down, you're like, I want to create this, and you involve God, and what is something that happened?
Or just an example of the things that I just said.
Yeah.
Um, well, when I was initially seeking to create financial freedom, which I did through doTERRA, one of the things that I did was I created a covenant with God, and I outlined three things that I felt I would need, and then I asked him for three things that he would ask of me. And then through that, um, there was a timeline set, and it was a big sacrifice on my end of things I needed to do, but then there was mountains that needed to move on his side too. And within the time frame that I allocated, it was a 60-day time period. I took action, and then I kept counting on him to do his parts. And within 5 minutes of writing it out and asking if he approved this contract covenant thing, um, I got an idea. I acted on it, and one of the mountains moved within 5 minutes,
Wow.
which was just sending an email to one person who had previously been a stalemate about a negotiation. And then she accepted it and actually said, I've been praying for you to ask me that again. So that one like moved right away. Another one was trickier that he did. And then the third one, we had about 26 days before the deadline for this other miracle to happen. But he did all of his parts in plenty of time. It wasn't like 11th hour thing.
Wow.
And that was huge for me. And then I had to do my part so the rest could finish, you know. But it was definitely a dance of back and forth. And that was a significant financial bonus for me to achieve that goal. And it happened while I was traveling in Europe. It happened when I was, you know, maybe least expecting some of the things to happen, but I was still acting in faith on it, and it happened. So that was in 20, I want to say 2014 or something like that. So it's been a while, but then I've done other things like that along the way. But that was one of the first big times I did that.
Wow, that's an amazing story. I think that that's a great model for people on how to involve a higher power in their life. Just yesterday, it's kind of a funny experience. My dog was staring out the window in our kitchen, just staring. She's a really pretty white golden doodle dog, and she's just staring out the window. And there's a bunch of snow where we are right now. And I'm like, what is she staring at? And my wife, she says, well, she's just focusing on what she wants to have happen. And until we respond to it and give her what she wants. And I was like, wow, that's like exactly how you get God to communicate with you. Cause I started thinking of like how animals communicate. Cause my wife was like, that's how she communicates. She just focuses on what she wants. And then when you notice, you go help her.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I was like, wow, like I feel like that's the same thing that you described, right? You focused on what you wanted and then you leave it up to God so that he opens those doors for you and he makes that path for you. And I wanted to ask you one final question, which I think is anybody that's gone through processes like we've done, they
Mm-hmm.
come across almost as if people talk about the universe as if it's God. Have you heard that before? The terminology when someone talks about the
Yeah, yeah,
universe is
yeah, yeah,
giving me this, or
yeah, yeah, yeah,
the
yeah.
universe is handing me this.
Very, that's spiritual. Very, yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. How do you, for yourself, how do you know that it is like God, like a personage, like a personage, and not like the universe, which is like just something it's a system that we use with our minds to get what we
Mm.
want.
Oh, well, for me, it's all ordered by God. So he orchestrates there's so much order, right? So God the Father has a master plan, and then he assigns, a team to orchestrate that with you or to collaborate with you, right? So if it's the universe to me, so like basically saying the collective, I don't know, like,
Yeah.
the group, the group of everyone. But God is always the leader of that. I remember this one little girl told me once, well, I don't believe in God, but I believe in angels. And I'm like, well, who do you think is the angel's boss? You know what
Right?
I mean? And
Yeah.
she just kind of was like, oh, I'm like, yeah, like there's got to be someone in charge of those angels, you know? So I feel, I think, people use lots of different names, we've always talked about that, but God is the creator of the universe. So he's the one.
Beautiful. And Kelly, how can people learn more about you, more about your program, where to find you
Oh,
on
sure.
social media if
So
they
on
want to connect with you?
Instagram, I'm Kelly King Creates. On Facebook, I'm Kelly King. I have a Facebook group called Creating with God that I've had for over a decade. And yeah, just reach out. I I have creation circle groups of 16 women every 8 weeks, just about. We meet once a week on Zoom, and I share a lot of these principles, but like way, way, way more. So I feel it's an honor and a privilege to teach people how to create with God and to make it a practice. I also have high reverence for agency for people and wherever they're at. And so if it's not your season, like it's not your season, but like think of me when it is. So
Awesome. And is your art and your music, is that on Instagram? Do you have photos
yeah,
of
so
things
on
you created?
YouTube, it's under Kelly King. I have two songs, Loved You Before, and another one called A Living Prayer. The art that you can see it probably in my Instagram feed, but yes, it's been such a fun experience for me to create in artistic ways, because for so long I was creating in business, and art is such a joy. So anyway, thank you so much for
Wonderful.
asking questions. It was such a joy to talk to you, and thank you to anyone who heard this whole thing.
Yeah.
I'm honored.
Likewise, Kelly, it's been a pleasure. I hope we cross paths again. I know we're
For
not
sure.
too far away.
Yes.
And for all of you that are listening, thank you for tuning in today. Please check out Kelly King's creations. Check out her art, her Instagram, her YouTube. And I'm going to link all of that in the podcast description. So
Perfect. Thank you
Kelly
so
Kelly
much.
will send me that information and I'll make sure it's all linked so you can go check her out. If you enjoy this episode, please subscribe to it, give us a good review so that we can have more of these discussions. And we'll talk next week.
Ken loves to get feedback from his audience. Send him a private message or write a review so that he can discuss topics that are most relevant to your spiritual experience. Thank you for listening today, and remember to join next week.